Yeah, I was thinking about how God works in just special ways. And as I was driving over, I thought about the um, the way He led in Africa. When first started going to Africa, I met a pastor by the name of Benson Chumbe, and he had a heart for discipleship, and we began developing a close relationship. And so I would come for several years in a row and speak at his church and train his leaders. And uh, to make a long story short, God eventually led Benson to come on WDA staff. He became the Zambian director, and now he's the African director for WDA. And in the midst of knowing Benson, he opened an opportunity for me to speak at the Baptist Seminary in Lusaka, which is the capital of Zambia. And one of the students who was there was 36 or so folks. And I didn't even know this until last year, actually. Um, One of those students that I got to teach for a whole week, it was a kind of a concentrated course, um, really took to home what he learned and went back to his church and began implementing it. And his name is Emmanuel, and he's now the Zambian director for WDA. And God opened doors from those situations. He opened more doors. I met a man from the Congo when I was in Zambia, and he invited me to come to his country. And so I did, and that man is Jules, and he's now the director of WDA for the Congo. And then one time on my way, I would fly in and out of Addis Ababa, which is capital of Ethiopia. And so I began praying for Ethiopia. And so on one of the trips back from the Congo, we changed planes in Addis, and I was in the middle seat. Nate Harkness, who's the international director for WDA, was to the left of me, and there was this gentleman to the right of me. And so we began talking, and he asked me why I was in Africa and what was I doing. And he said, well, I've been praying for someone to come and share with our churches the importance of discipleship. And so it was just a God appointment, really. It turns out that man is now the director of WDA in Ethiopia. And just to show you how God puts things together, Nate was going to back home to Minnesota. This gentleman was going to the exact same city in Minnesota. So they were able to spend time together in Minnesota. And then we received an invitation to come to Ethiopia and start WDA in Ethiopia. So it's just been God's unique way of putting us with key leaders. And these are all really outstanding leaders in their country. So just, to me, it's kind of the adventure of being a Christian. You get to just watch God work in different ways. He touches you with other people. No, that's been a joy. I've been there for 50 years, discipling university students, and just over the years had the great privilege of seeing young men's lives really significantly changed. Several of the guys I discipled are now pastors. One of the men I discipled was a medical missionary for a number of years. He just recently retired. And currently I have, it's an interesting situation. God's given me, I guess you could say, favor in a fraternity, which is not the normal place that you have Bible studies. But I have a Bible study with a group of guys from the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. And because I've been doing it for a number of years, since the mid-'80s, they have asked me for the last, I guess, 10 years to also have a Bible study with all their new associates. So any of the guys that pledged the fraternity, they come to a Bible study that I lead for the new associates. And then I also do a Bible study for the older brothers. And then I guess it's 3 years now. 3 years ago, I had a whole group of seniors graduate. And they all said, hey, we want to keep meeting. And so I have a Zoom Bible study every week with guys who graduated. And they're all over the country now. But we meet every week and study the Word together and get to encourage them in their walk. So it's just been very, very fruitful. Most of these guys, if you could talk to them, would tell you that it's probably while they were in Bible study that they really committed their lives to Christ. It became their faith. It was real to them by just their experience together in the Bible study. Yeah, well, I was a fairly young man back then. I was raised in a Christian home, so I had that great privilege. And all the way through high school and college, I had some goals, one of which was to be liked by everybody. And but unfortunately, in order to do that, I thought I needed to just change who I was depending on which group I was with. So nobody ever really knew me because I wouldn't express strong opinions for fear that, that might ruffle feathers or whatever. So I went all the way through high school and college. I was moderately popular, and I was an athlete. I was a runner. But my senior year at the university, I went to Duke University. My dad, I was home for Christmas break, and we happened to live in upstate New York at the time. And my dad was working in the garage putting up some insulation, and he was on a ladder, and the ladder slipped, and he hit his head, and his brain started swelling. They couldn't stop the swelling, and so he died. And so it caused me to have to really examine my life. I was planning on going to dental school, but when I looked at my life, I realized I struggled to make B's in science, and I made A's in history and English and philosophy. And so I just decided, and it was January, without any prep, that I would just take the law school entrance exam and see if I would do well on it. I'd go to law school instead of dental school. And so I did well, and so I ended up going to law school at the University of Georgia. And because I was a long-distance runner, I was looking for another guy to run with, to stay in shape. And there was a guy a year ahead of me who had run track for the University of Tennessee, and he was a distance runner. So we started running together, and it turns out he was involved in what was called Campus Crusade for Christ. Back then, it's now called Cru. And so he invited me to come to their meetings, and I started going, and I realized, whoa, these people have a different kind of relationship with Jesus than I do. I just thought you should be a Christian because good people are Christians kind of mentality. And so I took what I was learning in my evidence class and what I was observing and just began to say, okay, if Jesus really is who he claims to be, then I want him to be my Lord. If he's not, then I don't want to play this game anymore. And I came to the conclusion at the end of, we were on quarter system then, at the end of the quarter that Jesus really was the Son of God. And so I committed my life to Christ at the end of that quarter. And just a couple things that really dramatically changed. I was a perfectionist, and so I was critical of myself and critical of other people a lot. And I almost, I guess you could say, felt like, okay, in order to be accepted, you need to, be hitting on all 8 cylinders all the time, kind of thing. And for the first time in my life, I felt fully known and fully loved and accepted. And it was like this huge weight just lifted off of me, because I knew the Lord knew me and yet loved me. And the other thing that happened was I got this real hunger for the Word of God. And so even though I had a lot of studying to do in law school, I started outlining books of the Bible. I started memorizing Scripture. I started sharing my faith, and within another quarter or so, I started leading a small group with folks. And so I went ahead and I got to my last year in law school and wasn't sure whether God wanted me to become an attorney or go into ministry. And so in September, I kept knocking on the door saying, God, what do you want me to do? And I got some good advice from a fellow Christian, and he said, don't worry about that right now. You just be faithful with what God's given you right now. And when you really need to make the decision, it'll become clear for you. So I interviewed law firms and had 4 job offers. But the more I prayed about it and thought about it, I realized I loved ministry more than I loved law. And so I ended up going on staff with Campus Crusade for Christ. And I worked with their high school ministry for 5 years. And then WGA was getting started, and Carl Wilson, the founder of WGA, asked if I would come and help him start WGA. I think the thing that's been so encouraging is just the vision that God gave us of what we should be as an organization, of trying to help the church and other Christian organizations, really believers in general, really begin to do discipleship just like Jesus did it. And we started off with 2 campus ministries, one at Georgia and one at the University of Tennessee, where Bob Dukes and Linda were at the University of Tennessee. And then God began to grow the campus ministry. And that was exciting, just to see the new staff that were coming on and the new universities that we were able to go to. And then we went through, I guess you could say, a rough period. And it was just, what's the word I want to use? It was a time of testing, I think, of, okay, are you going to stay true to what I've called you to do, and just weather the storms? And so we weathered the storms. We stayed. And God just has begun, coming out of that, He just so has super abundantly blessed WGA. We were called Worldwide Discipleship Association in the beginning, and we were in 0 other countries other than the U.S. So you can see and I think we're now, if I remember right, 76, is that right? Countries. And have about 80 staff or so. And to me, it's just been so encouraging to see the way all different kinds of cultures really grasp what we're talking about. And I would say, really, if the international world has grabbed it better than the U.S. world has, which is interesting to me, but not surprising in some ways. Yeah, so I'm super encouraged with where we are, and it just looks like God's going to keep opening more and more opportunities in more and more countries. Well, I'd like to thank Nancy, my wife, first and foremost, because she's been a great helpmate, and we've shared in this ministry now, I guess 54 years, since I was 1 year before we got married. So yeah, it's just been a great privilege to serve together. I like to thank Bob Dukes, the president of WGA. He and I both were there when WGA got started, and Bob's just been a unique friend over the years, and I just feel so blessed to call him my friend and to have benefited from. He's just a man who encourages me so well, and so I deeply appreciate his encouragement. My kids have been really supportive of my ministry and our ministry as a family. Really, they've all participated in it, and so I deeply appreciate them. And now I have 18 grandkids, and they're starting to get involved in ministry as well. So it's pretty much a family affair these days. Carl Wilson, the founder of WGA, he helped deepen my biblical knowledge, gave me a great biblical foundation for how I approach life and the things that I understand from the Word. He helped lay a really good foundation for that. So I deeply appreciate his ministry in my life. Maybe other staff that I've worked with over the years, it's just been a joy. It's to have a team of people working and just seeing what the Lord can do through the different gifts and personalities and the ways we could come together and bring glory to Him. So yeah, I think of all the different staff that have served with me at the University of Georgia. It's been really special. Hi, my name is Dave Johnson. I'm the Next Generation Director for Worldwide Discipleship Association, and I'm also the Campus Director for Worldwide Discipleship Association at the University of Georgia.